Mike Tomlin, legendary coach, always delivering in the regular season, has won a championship in his lifetime. But when the playoffs come around, things just don't go right. Does that sound familiar? Does that sound like a certain NBA head coach? Did you guess a guy that won a championship back in 2008? Did you guess a guy that comes up short time and time again in the playoffs? Did you guess Doc Rivers? See, both of these coaches have had success in their careers. Both of these coaches can get your team to the playoffs. Both of these coaches are highly regarded, and both of these coaches might just be overrated. What's good, YouTube? It's Dre, and today we got to talk about why Mike Tomlin might just be the Doc Rivers of the NFL. And if you're new to this channel, I'll be giving my thoughts on anything and everything in the world of the NFL, the NBA, and maybe I'll sprinkle in some WWE in there. So if that's your vibe, go ahead, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit that notification bell. And now, without further ado, let's get back to the video. So let's start by talking about Mike Tomlin, the man who has never finished with a record below 500. Which, you got to think about it, over the span of 19 seasons, he's never finished below 500. That's actually crazy. Now, there are some good and there are some bad when it comes to Mike, and you can even ask Steelers fans, they'll tell you. So let's start with the good. And to do that, we got to start with probably the highest point of his career, which is Super Bowl 43 when he faced the Arizona Cardinals. And I gotta say, after Larry Fitzgerald scored this touchdown, I thought for sure the Arizona Cardinals were gonna win this game. But then Big Ben did Big Ben things, and Santonio Holmes with the catch of the century right here. And I'll be real with you, in real time, I thought for sure this wasn't a catch. But then they played that replay, and I was like, how in the hell did he catch this? So as we know, the Steelers beat the Cardinals and won the Super Bowl. Now keep in mind, this would be his peak because he just took over for Bill Cowher 3 years earlier. Now don't worry, there's a lot more good to come. And we got to start with 2 years after this Super Bowl win, where he went back to the Super Bowl, where he faced off against Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers. Now, I'll admit, I was hate watching during this game because I was still salty after the Steelers beat my Jets in the AFC Championship. And it would be a successful hate watch as the Steelers fell behind 21-3 in the first half. Now, they would come back, cutting the lead to 4 at one point, but this was Aaron Rodgers we were talking about, a young Aaron Rodgers. And every time the Steelers got close, A-Rod made plays, which led to the Steelers losing this Super Bowl with a final score of 31-25. Now, I know that was a bit of a downer, so how would the Steelers respond next season? Well, they would finish with 12 wins, and yet unfortunately they didn't win the division, which meant they had to play the wild card round on the road. Now, luckily for them, they drew Tim Tebow and the Denver Broncos. So I'm sure you're thinking, easy win for the Steelers, right? But nah, Tim Tebow, with the power of the Almighty, hit this clutch throw to Demaryius Thomas in overtime to send the Steelers packing. But no problem, right? The next season is here, and it's time for the Steelers to right their wrong, right? Well, they finished with 8 wins. But at least Tomlin kept that above 500 streak alive. So we move on to the 2013 season, where the Steelers again finished with 8 wins. But hey, that above 500 streak though. So we move on to the 2014 season, where the Steelers finished with 11 wins, and then they won their division home playoff game against the division rival Raven. Surely they show up for this game. Well, they got thoroughly outplayed and lost 30-17. And once again, Mike Tomlin finished above 500. So we move on to the 2015 season, where the Steelers literally snuck into the playoffs with 10 wins because my goddamn Jets could not beat an injured Bills team in week 17. But anyway, so on to Cincinnati they go, where they're facing AJ McCarron at quarterback. And as expected, the Steelers go out in front 15-0 before somehow, some way blowing this lead and falling behind 16-15 in the fourth quarter. Now, y'all might remember this game as the game where Vontaze Burfict had a bounty out against the Steelers, I guess, injuring Big Ben in the closing seconds of the third quarter, and then the biggest play where the Bengals had the game won, but Burfict decided to make the most boneheaded and dirty play I've ever seen, where he rearranged Antonio Brown's brain. The Steelers would then go on to win this game and then promptly lose to the Broncos in the next round, where they faced off against the remains of Peyton Manning and that incredible Broncos defense. So 2015 is in the books, and we move on to 2016, where the Steelers finished with 11 wins. They won their division, and they got the chance to host a playoff game against the Miami Dolphins, which ended up going well. A 30-12 blowout, followed up by a close win against the pre-Pat Mahomes Kansas City Chiefs. So on to the AFC Championship game against the New England Patriots, where it wasn't even a contest, a 36-17 blowout. And see, this would be the last playoff run where the Steelers won a playoff game under Tomlin. That's right, Mike Tomlin has not won a game in the playoffs since January 16th, 2017. Let's rattle them off. The very next year, a loss to Blake Bortles and the Jacksonville Jaguars, at home by the way, a game where they fell behind 28-7 in the first half. The 2020 playoffs, where they faced off against the division rivals, the Cleveland Browns. Remember that quote from professional TikTok dancer Juju, where he said, "The Browns is the Browns"? Well, that comment would age like milk, as the Cleveland Browns went into Pittsburgh and absolutely destroyed the Steelers, going up as much as 35-7 in the first half. Now keep in mind, that's another playoff loss at home where they were favored. So how would the Steelers respond the next season? Well, they would get blown out by Pat Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs, where the Chiefs would send Big Ben into retirement. Mike Tomlin, now 0-3. The next playoff appearance against Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills. Now this one I don't really blame the Steelers for losing. They had Mason Rudolph at QB. But another blowout, and now Mike Tomlin is 0-4 since 2017. We move on to the 2024 playoffs, where the Steelers faced off against the division rival Baltimore Ravens, this time with Russell Wilson at QB. And once again, the Steelers got blown out in the wildcard round, where they fell behind as much as 21-0, ultimately losing to the Ravens 28-14. Now you might be noticing a trend. All of these playoff losses since 2017 have honestly been blowouts. So what do you think happened to the Steelers in this year's playoffs? A blowout loss to the Houston Texans, this time with Aaron Rodgers as his QB. Mike Tomlin, now 0-6 since 2017, with all of those games honestly being blowouts. So Mike Tomlin has had multiple QBs and multiple opportunities where he was favored to win the game, but has not gotten it done in the playoffs. So you tell me, does that scream legendary, or does that just scream that we are living in the past? But now that we've talked enough about Mike Tomlin, how does this compare to Doc Rivers? Let me explain. Well, just like Mike Tomlin, the peak for Doc Rivers came early, where he won a championship with the Celtics in 2008. Now, as a Lakers fan, I do get pissed off looking back at this finals. It was Kobe's one and only MVP season, but the Lakers just couldn't get it done. And that Game 4 loss still haunts me till this day. But back to Doc. See, just like Mike Tomlin, Doc Rivers would actually make it back to the NBA Finals just 2 years later. And once again, it will be against the Los Angeles Lakers. And the Celtics would find themselves up 3-2 in this series, one win away from another NBA championship. But unfortunately, or fortunately in my case, my Lakers would pull this out in Game 7 and Kobe would win his 5th ring. And this would be the last time that Doc Rivers made an NBA Finals. In fact, the closest he would get would be in 2012, where the Celtics were up 3-2 in that series with a chance to close it out on their home floor until LeBron said, fuck all of that, and the Celtics would lose that one in 7 games. But I mean, that is prime LeBron, so there's not much you could do. So how would Doc fare in the future playoff appearances? Well, go ahead and grab your popcorn because this is gonna be good. See, Doc Rivers would move on from the Celtics and start coaching the Clippers. And man, were there some playoff moments when he was coaching this team. So let's start with the 2014 playoffs where the Clippers were facing off against the OKC Thunder. Specifically Game 5. Now we know about some of the Clippers' all-time choke jobs in the playoffs, but this one specifically does not get talked about enough. I mean, you're up 104-97 with 49 seconds left, with a veteran point guard in Chris Paul, and in most situations this would be enough to wrap the game up, right? But not for the Clippers. In probably the worst stretch of basketball that I've seen Chris Paul play, the Clippers would go ahead and choke away this lead and lose to the OKC Thunder 105-104, eventually losing the series in 6. But hey, it's just one playoff run, as bad as it was. So how would the Clippers respond the very next season? Well, in the second round, they would face off against James Harden and the Houston Rockets, and they would be up 3-1 in that series, one win away from their first ever trip to the conference finals. Now they would lose in Game 5, but then they were headed home for Game 6, and they were up big in the third quarter. The Rockets even put James Harden on the bench, which almost signaled that they were waving the white flag. Now I want you to keep this in mind. The Clippers were up by damn near 20 in the third quarter. James Harden goes to the bench, and they have guys like Josh Smith and Corey Brewer running the show. So surely the Clippers pull this one out, right? Well, Corey Brewer and Josh Smith didn't get the memo, and they decided they were going to go out there and dominate the Clippers for the rest of this game, as the Clippers would then choke away this lead and somehow lose by double digits, and eventually losing this series in 7 games. So Doc Rivers has now blown a 3-1 lead. Surely this will be the last time this happens, right? Well, let's fast forward to the NBA bubble. In 2020 during the pandemic, where once again in the second round, the Clippers are up 3-1 this time against Nikola Jokic and the Denver Nuggets. Now this one might just be worse than 2015, as the Clippers were up 15 points in the third quarter of Game 5, only to end up losing 111-105. Then, in Game 6, they were up 19 early in the second half, only to lose that one 111-98. And finally, in Game 7, the Clippers were once again up double digits, 12 points late in the first half, only to blow that lead and get blown out 104-89. Shout out Way Off P. So that's now 2 blown 3-1 leads by Doc Rivers. So as expected, he gets fired, and he ends up going to the Philadelphia 76ers. And it didn't take long for him to disappoint. See, in the 2021 playoffs, the Sixers found themselves against the Atlanta Hawks in round 2, a Trae Young-led Atlanta Hawk team that they were heavily favored against. So of course, this series went 7 games. Now, if you're an NBA fan, we all know what happened in Game 7. Ben Simmons passes up a wide open dunk, and the Sixers would end up losing this one 103-96. So yet another disappointing finish to a Doc Rivers led playoff run. But don't you worry, there's more. See, the next season, the Sixers decided that Ben Simmons was the problem, and they traded him to Brooklyn for James Harden. So naturally, expectations go up after this trade, which brings me to the 2022 playoffs, where in the second round, the Sixers faced off against an old friend in Jimmy Butler and the Miami Heat. Now, the Sixers weren't necessarily favored in this series, as the Miami Heat were the #1 seed, but it's the way that they got absolutely punked in Game 6 by Jimmy Butler, which led him to say this And now we move on to the 2023 playoffs, where once again in the second round, a Doc Rivers-led team finds themselves one win away from the conference finals. Let me take you to Game 6. The Sixers are at home up 3-2 with a chance to go to the conference finals. Jason Tatum is struggling, 0 for 10 from the field in the first half, and yet they couldn't pull it out, as Tatum would come alive in the second half and the Sixers would lose this game 95-86. Which brings me to Game 7, where Jason Tatum dragged his nuts all over the Sixers to the tune of 51 points. In fact, the leading scorer for Philadelphia was Tobias Harris. The irony. The Sixers would get absolutely demolished in this game, losing 112-88. So yet another disappointing finish to a Doc Rivers-led playoff run. So I guess this was the last straw for the Sixers, and they decided to fire Doc Rivers. But this man keeps failing upward, as he ended up landing a job with the Milwaukee Bucks. Well, since landing that job, he's gone 0-2 in the playoffs, losing in the first round to the Indiana Pacers twice. And as we speak, Giannis is on the verge of getting traded, and the Bucks stink. But yet this guy still has a job. So as you can see, both Mike Tomlin and Doc Rivers have been disappointments in the playoffs time and time again. But what are some other ways where they're similar? Well, it's the way that they're highly regarded even after these playoff disappointments. Let's start with Tomlin. As we all know, he recently stepped down as the head coach of the Steelers. But because the Steelers retained his rights, a team would have to trade for him if they want him to coach their team. And if you ask the average media member right now if a team should trade for Mike Tomlin, their answer would be yes. Even after all of those playoff losses, the media still holds him in high regard. Now, how does that compare with Doc Rivers? Even after playoff choke after playoff choke, this man was still getting defended in the media and was still landing jobs, which showed that teams and the media still held him in high regard. In fact, he was voted as a top 15 coach in NBA history, which is honestly very ridiculous. Now, do I think both of these guys are bad coaches? No, I actually think they're good coaches. I just think that everyone's opinion of them is a bit inflated, hence overrated. But I want to know your thoughts. Do you think Doc Rivers and Mike Tomlin are overrated? Do you even think they're good coaches? What do you think of their playoff failures? Is there another similarity that they share that I didn't mention? Let me know in the comments. Also, if you've enjoyed this video and made it this far, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe for more, as it will help this channel grow. Also, if you want to find out how the Jets have stressed me the hell out for the past 15 years, go ahead and click this video on your screen. And as always, thanks for hanging with me today. It's Dre, and these have been my thoughts. Until next time.